Brock Purdy has done nothing but win since he was dubbed Mr. Irrelevant as the last pick in the 2022 NFL Draft. Coming out of high school, he was criticized by Nick Saban. He had a lowly pre-draft rating of 5.57. Players with that low of a rating are usually relegated to free agency. But today, Brock Purdy is one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. Welcome to Behind the Game, the untold story of Brock Purdy. Coming out of high school, Brock Purdy was the 2017 Arizona Gatorade Player of the Year. After a storied collegiate career, he entered the 2022 NFL Draft, where every NFL team passed on him multiple times. How did so many NFL scouts get it completely wrong? Let's dig in and take a look at what happened. Brock Purdy was born in Arizona and attended Perry High School. There he became the varsity starting quarterback his sophomore year. His school played in what is regarded as the sixth-most competitive high school division in America. Despite the stiff competition, Purdy led his school to the state championship game in both his junior and senior seasons. And in his senior season, he was named the Arizona Gatorade Football Player of the Year. And that year, his stats were extremely impressive. He put up 5,500 yards from scrimmage with 57 touchdowns. Brock Purdy's outstanding numbers weren't a surprise to his high school coach. He described Brock Purdy as a grown man playing against high school kids. Even as a high school kid, Purdy was blessed with amazing intensity and focus. By the end of his high school career, Purdy was a three-star recruit with offers from Central Florida, Iowa State, Boise State, Texas A&M, and Alabama. But the Bama offer wasn't what it appeared to be. When Brock went down to Tuscaloosa for a visit with Nick Saban, Saban told him that he had below average height and that his arm strength and throwing accuracy were just average. Hearing that from Saban kind of took Brock by surprise because his throwing accuracy was one of his biggest strengths. After his disastrous visit at Alabama, Purdy then committed to Iowa State. Nick Saban has been arguably the best college football of all time, but even the best sometimes miss. And Alabama missed on Brock Purdy. Heading into his first collegiate season at Iowa State, Brock was listed as the team's third-string quarterback. But then, starter Kyle Kemp got injured during the first game of the season. And the backup to Kyle Kemp was Zed Nolan, and he played poorly, which gave Brock Purdy his chance to play. In an October game against number 12 Oklahoma State, Purdy was called off the bench. Brock Purdy didn't disappoint. He completed 18 of his 23 passes for 318 yards. He accounted for 5 total touchdowns, and he also racked up 84 rushing yards. His performance led Iowa State to a huge upset win. And as these kind of stories go, Brock Purdy was now the starting quarterback. Iowa State finished the year with a 7-6 record. Purdy's numbers were quite good as he completed 65% of his passes for 3,900 yards and 27 touchdowns, and he only had 9 interceptions. He also rushed for 8 touchdowns, breaking an Iowa State record for total touchdowns that had stood for 41 years. The following season, Iowa State relied more on the running of All-American running back Breece Hall, who is now with the New York Jets. Iowa State improved to 9-3, which tied the 2000 season for the best record in school history. Iowa State racked up wins over number 18 ranked Oklahoma and number 17 ranked Texas. Those wins propelled Iowa State to number 6 in the college football playoff rankings. But in their biggest game of the year, the Big 12 championship game, Brock Purdy had one of his worst games of the year. He threw for 322 yards, but he had no touchdowns and had 3 interceptions. Iowa State didn't make the college football playoff, but they were selected to play number 25 Oregon in the Fiesta Bowl. Brock Purdy bounced back in the Fiesta Bowl, completing 69% of his passes. He threw for 156 yards and had 1 passing touchdown and 1 rushing touchdown. Iowa State ended the season ranked 9th in the final poll, which was their highest ranking to ever close the season. Expectations were very high for the Cyclones entering the 2021 season. Iowa State was ranked 7th in the nation heading into the season. That was their highest ever preseason ranking. But after losses to number 10 Iowa and an unranked Baylor squad, Iowa State dropped completely out of the top 25 before the month of September was even over. The Cyclones were still unranked heading into a late October matchup with number 8 ranked Oklahoma State. But in that one, Brock Purdy completed 81% of his passes for 307 yards with 2 touchdowns and no interceptions. Purdy propelled Iowa State to a huge upset win. After that big win, Iowa State was back in the top 25, rising to number 22 in the rankings. But just 1 week after the big upset win over Oklahoma State, they lost to an unranked West Virginia team. Iowa State finished the year with a disappointing 7-6 record. Despite the team's dismal performance, Purdy completed a career-high 71% of his passes for 3,100 yards with 20 total touchdowns and just 8 interceptions. It became obvious that Brock Purdy was having a tremendous impact on the Iowa State football program. In his 4 years there, the team had 4 consecutive winning seasons for the first time since the period between 1923 and 1927. At Iowa State, Purdy broke 32 team records and was a 3-time All Big 12 Conference quarterback selection. After his senior season, Brock Purdy declared for the 2022 NFL Draft. But despite a historic college career, scouts weren't all that interested in the Cyclones quarterback. You see, Brock Purdy didn't have that prototypical NFL quarterback size. At the NFL Combine, he measured in at just over 6 feet tall and weighed in at just 212 pounds. And while at the Combine, he didn't do anything really impressive to improve his draft stock. He only ran a 4.84 in a 40-yard dash, which was the 4th slowest time a quarterback had run. And he just didn't show overall great athleticism. In the drills, one scout wrote that Purdy did not test well, was a limited athlete, and his body development had maxed out, and he just threw the ball okay. But as has been said many times, the things you can't measure in testing are what really make the intangibles that much more impressive, and that's true with Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy showed he had a great mind and he was full of heart. Many teams also overlooked how great his pocket presence was at Iowa State. He also scored extremely high in his cognitive testing. The S2 cognitive test shows how fast a player can process during a game. Any score above 80 on the cognitive test is considered elite. Brock Purdy scored in the mid-90s. That's a type of score that Drew Brees, Patrick Mahomes, and Josh Allen scored when they took the S2 cognitive test. Pretty good company, I'd say. His cognitive test scores affirmed why Brock Purdy played so well under pressure. And it shows why that when he was under pressure, he was still able to focus on things while chaos was stirring around him. Heading into the NFL draft, Purdy wasn't projected to be drafted at all, but could perhaps latch on with some team as a free agent. But as the last pick in the draft approached, Brock got a call from the 49ers telling him they were going to select him with the 262nd pick of the draft, that being the last pick in the NFL draft. And as the last player picked, he would earn the title of Mr. Irrelevant. Heading into training camp at the San Francisco 49ers, it was unlikely that the rookie Brock Purdy was going to make the team. He was the 4th quarterback on the depth chart behind Trey Lance, Jimmy Garoppolo, and Nate Sudfeld. But after an impressive preseason camp, the 49ers decided to cut Nate Sudfeld, and Brock Purdy made the 53-man roster as the 3rd-string quarterback. Mr. Irrelevant had made the team. The 3rd overall draft pick from the previous year, Trey Lance, started the year as the San Francisco 49ers starting quarterback. But after breaking his ankle in the 2nd game of the season, former starter Jimmy Garoppolo took over as the team's number 1 guy, which meant Brock Purdy was now the backup. The 49ers were on a roll with Jimmy G under center in their first 10 games. 49ers were 7-3, and they looked like they were making a legitimate playoff run. However, in a Week 13 matchup against the Miami Dolphins, Jimmy G got sacked, and he ended up breaking his foot. The reins to the team now were going to be held by Brock Purdy. In his first real NFL action, Brock completed 67% of his passes for 210 yards. He threw for 2 touchdowns with just 1 interception. His performance off the bench led San Francisco to a 33-17 win over Miami. After the game, it was confirmed that Jimmy G would be out for the remainder of the season, which meant that Brock Purdy would be the starting quarterback of the San Francisco 49ers for the balance of the season and playoffs. While it's definitely nice for a rookie quarterback to be surrounded by a lot of talented skill players, but to be thrust into the starting quarterback role late in the season on a team that's expected to make a deep playoff run definitely isn't an easy situation. And then Brock Purdy made his first NFL start a week later against the GOAT, Tom Brady. Brock Purdy played outstanding, completing 76% of his passes for 185 yards and 3 total touchdowns. Obviously, the team knew right then that they might have something special in their rookie quarterback. Brock Purdy proceeded to lead the 49ers on a 4-game winning streak to end the season, and then the 49ers entered the playoffs as the 2nd seed in the NFC. Brock Purdy's 6th ever NFL start was also his first ever playoff start, and it was against number 7 seed Seattle Seahawks. Brock put together yet another strong performance, completing 60% of his passes for 332 yards. That was the first time that Brock Purdy broke the 300-yard mark in a game in his short NFL career. He also accounted for 4 touchdowns as the 49ers went on to win 41-23. With this performance, Brock Purdy became the first rookie quarterback since Sammy Baugh in 1937 to throw for over 200 yards and 2 touchdowns in a playoff win. Next up was the Dallas Cowboys at the number 5 seed in the divisional round. Purdy's play wasn't as great in this one, but he still was effective, completing 65% of his passes for 214 yards and no turnovers as the Niners won 19-13. After this big win, the team only needed one more win to make it to the Super Bowl. All they had to do was take down the number 1 seed Philadelphia Eagles in the NFC Championship game. But in the first quarter, Brock Purdy hit his arm as he was trying to make a pass. And then when he tried to grasp the ball and throw after that, it just simply didn't work. Clearly, something was wrong. Purdy was forced to go back into the game despite being injured, as the team didn't have another quarterback available. Brock Purdy couldn't perform to the best of his abilities, and the Niners lost the game. After further examination, it was determined that Brock Purdy tore his UCL. Luckily, he didn't have to go through full Tommy John surgery. Instead, in March, he underwent the less complex UCL repair with internal brace augmentation surgery. Brock became just the 3rd NFL quarterback to undergo that specific kind of surgery. It's a fairly new procedure, but it was successful. Brock's rehab went according to plan, and by August he was back practicing with no restrictions. Despite his return to practice, the top quarterback spot was not automatically his. Trey Lance had recovered from his season-ending injury and was also ready to contend for the starting job. But when Trey Lance took the field during preseason games, he looked kind of lost and played poorly. So poorly that the 49ers traded him to the Dallas Cowboys, meaning that Brock Purdy would be QB1 moving forward. The 49ers started the 2023 season hot, going 5-0. But in Week 6, Brock Purdy lost his first ever regular season game after the worst performance of his career. He completed just 44% of his passes for 125 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, and 1 fumble versus the Cleveland Browns. After that loss, the 49ers went on to lose their next 2 games. At that point, people started to question whether Brock Purdy really was that guy, and had the 49ers made the right decision. Was he a good quarterback, or was he propped up by Kyle Shanahan's system and the all-pro players that surrounded him? After a bye week, the 49ers bounced back and won 6 straight games. During that winning streak, Brock Purdy completed 71% of his passes for 1,700 yards with 17 touchdowns and just 2 interceptions. His performance over that period got him in the conversation for the MVP award. If the 49ers wanted to push their win streak to 7 straight and keep Brock Purdy in the MVP conversation, they would have to beat the Baltimore Ravens. But unfortunately, Brock Purdy had the worst game of his NFL career. Against the Ravens in a nationally broadcast primetime game, Purdy threw a career-high 4 interceptions and 0 touchdown passes as San Francisco lost in embarrassing fashion to the Ravens. With just 2 games left in the regular season, the negative commentary on Brock Purdy grew quite loud. But as he has done over and over in his career, Brock Purdy bounced back. Against the Washington Commanders the following week, the 49ers won 27-10. Brock Purdy had a respectable game, throwing for 230 yards with 2 touchdowns and no interceptions. With their number 1 seed playoff spot confirmed, Brock Purdy and most of the starters didn't play in the season finale against the Los Angeles Rams. In their first playoff game, the 49ers beat the Green Bay Packers 24-21. Purdy was 23 out of 39 for 252 yards with 1 touchdown and no interceptions. In the conference game against the Detroit Lions, the San Francisco 49ers were down 24-7 at halftime. Brock Purdy led the 49ers on an amazing comeback, and the Niners won 34-31 in a thriller. And now, today, Brock Purdy, in just his 2nd year, is in the Super Bowl. The 49ers now face Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs for all the marbles. We have been witness to one of the most amazing stories in NFL history. We watched Mr. Irrelevant become extremely relevant in just his second season in the NFL. Obviously, there is much more of the Brock Purdy story that has to be written. Stay tuned.